And it's a little bit after 5:30. We'll call tonight's EDA meeting to order. Karen, can we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Roberts.
Here.
Commissioner Huntosh.
Here.
Commissioner Husnick.
Here.
Commissioner Finneman.
Here.
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
And Commissioner Erickson.
Here.
And President Bain.
Here. Thank you. Ask all those that are able to please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Happy New Year, everybody. We'd like to welcome Leif Erickson, our new EDA member, to the board. Welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And members of the EDA, you have before you an agenda for this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose? Motion carries. First item on tonight's agenda is to approve the minutes from our regular meeting, which was December 9th, 2019. I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Abstain? Motion carries. Next item on tonight's agenda is a revisit of our 2020-2021 work plan. This has been an item of discussion for working session last several meetings of the EDA. And our goal tonight is to do a final review and ultimately approval. We'll kick it over to Dan for discussion.
President, members of the EDA, before you tonight is kind of the last and kind of the final draft version of the 2020-2021 work plan. This has been talked about for probably, I think, 3 or 4 working sessions on there. We've kind of bounced around. I've taken back all of that feedback and then try to take that feedback back and assemble the work plan that you have here in front of you tonight. I think one thing that's important to note about this work plan is that this work plan pretty much sets the guideposts, for the EDA. It's a living document. It's not one where we just get the document approved and sit it on the shelf. It's one that we're going to constantly kind of go back to. The executables are going to be reported back on a quarterly basis to EDA, has been done in the past, saying we've done these 3 things this year for this quarter for the first goal. If we complete an executable, we can add a new executable to that one. So it's a malleable document, is one that's a living document. So what you see on here is we're not closing the book to this. It's just a starting point to kind of set some guideposts for the next 2 years for the EDA. A couple of the high-level changes to this year's from the previous work plan is that we actually shrunk the goals down from 7 in the previous one down to 5. So we actually have 5 goals this year in this version. So it's a little bit more streamlined that way, a little bit more targeted. But there wasn't a lot of substantial changes to the overall goals. And again, I don't know if you want me to go through every executable, but I did try to encapsulate those conversations, those lengthy conversations as best here. So if there is any kind of last minute changes, let me know. But right now, this is sort of the document that's been created based on all those conversations. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but the recommended requested action from staff would be approval of this document so we can take this document and start getting agendas set up for 2020 and 2021.
Members of the EDA, as you look at the draft before you, before final adoption, and when I say final adoption, knowing that this document will be a work in progress, and steps are intended to build off of themselves, and so we expect this to be a working document. Is there anything that we've talked about, or things that we think either may be missing or we'd like to see presented in a different way? Or I will also say, any questions of staff?
I have to.
No feedback? Okay. Any other, hearing silence, is it, mean we're ready to approve? Is there any, I guess any other, open it up for just general discussion as well? guess I'd like to say, I think it's so, thank you for the work that's gone into this document so far, and I think we've had a lot of good discussion leading to this point. I think this is the right starting spot. I think as we get started and as we become more defined in some of these goals, this will indeed be a living, breathing document. Also, I'm happy to see that we have some budget room. This does not stretch us to the end of our budget by any means, and so there's still some capacity. So as things may get added, there's room to do that. And so I'm happy with where we've landed and would encourage us to adopt this evening. Not hearing any further discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I would move to approve.
And I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. Item number 7 this evening is the resolution for a CDA grant application. Dan, are you walking us through this as well?
Yep, I'll walk you through this. President, members of the EDA, if you recall, I think it was back in last summer, we have submitted a grant application, was approved through Washington County CDA for a sewer shed study or an infrastructure study of the sewer system for the downtown area here in Forest Lake. Specifically looking at what's the current load in that system, how much capacity is left over. If you recall, that study was actually broken down into, it was a multi-year study. Year 1, which was 19, was done where the collectors or the data, the gauges were out in the system, collecting the data, and then in 2020, all that data will get brought back and then analyzed, and then based on that, we'll look at how much capacity is there, and develop some models that we can start plugging numbers into to say how much would a, say 100 unit, redevelopment in the area, what would that impact be to the existing system? Goal being is that if there's any need for a major improvement or major, infrastructure improvement project, we'll know that in advance of a project, so there's not going to be a surprise to a developer when they start getting in the ground and realizing, oh, the sewer capacity is not here. So this was presented as a 2-year cycle, and what you have before you here is the second grant application, which will be, if approved, will be submitted to Washington County for their review and hopefully approval. Since the total amount of this one is above the $10,000 threshold, we're looking at a $21,000 total cost for the modeling and analyzation. The funding is different, so we're looking at a 50-50 match, so the impact to the EDA on this grant application will be $10,500. Since the total amount is $21,000, I did factor this into the EDA's 2020 budget, so it's already been pre-budgeted for us, so there's not a strain on budget to fund this grant or to fund this study work. And speaking to Ryan, if we get the approvals to Washington County CDA, which would happen in February, since this would need to be done at a board level meeting, and the next meeting is
February 18th.
February 18th. So after that, we'd know if we're funded for it, get that approval back to Ryan. The deliverables back on the modeling would be sometime in May. So we still would see those probably, in the second quarter of this year. So then we'd have that study back for review at the EDA level. So staff again is recommending approval of the CDA grant application, and as part of that application, the CDA requires a resolution of support from the EDA, and one of those is also included in your packet. And that resolution number is 01-1320-01, not 10 as listed in the overview memo, it's an 01. So staff is recommending approval of both the grant application and resolution, and then once approved, I will get those submitted down to Washington County for their consideration. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions on either the study or the process.
I would ask,
Go ahead.
probably just so I can understand something better, and maybe I've been told before, but we'll understand rates and flows off of the various systems we have out there. Will we also be able to see where failures and flaws are, or is that still a surprising story underneath the ground? We got a sense of what is moving through the system. And if there is a block, will we understand if there's a block? If there's a damage, I don't think we're going to understand the quality or the capabilities of the systems underground at this point after the study, will we?
The condition of the infrastructure is not an analyzed part of this process. That would take separate contractors. Something that's in the budget obviously is for the public works to obtain this equipment, televising equipment. We'd have to go through and jet, clean, and then televise all the sanitary sewer lines. That's done on a 5-year cycle where the city gets through all the lines within a 5-year cycle. So that's when we look at that stuff prior to street projects. In the northern portion of this area, we do have some of that information already completed, lining up for future street projects, and we'll continue to be ahead of the year's street projects to a plan accordingly for any of that work. So this is based on size, diameter pipe, and zoning, potential zoning changes or density you're proposing on these commercial industrial areas. That's what do we have for the existing capacity, what upgrades or changes to the system would need to be made. It's all theoretically based, right? But you're able to take the calculations, sit in an office, line them up with the actual sewer flow you collected. So even though you might have said density on this block, and you would expect by calculating with the calculator, the flow should be this, we have real data now with the flow meters that were put in. So that now accounts, because we went through a wet and dry season, we account for actual flows that were happening based on I&I. Obviously, if we have I&I spikes, we know we got some condition of pipe that probably needs some repair work, right? Because we're way above theoretical calculations.
So you'll get clues along the way as to
Yep.
where there might be issues. Otherwise, is it sort of developer-driven after that, specific development-driven, that you will then dig in and look at the associated utilities at that time? Or is there a testing thing that comes in our budget at some point in time where we do look in advance and just empirically test these things?
You mean to look at the condition of the piping?
Yeah,
So the whole sewer system's on a 5-year cycle through Public Works.
okay.
We do it in separate zones. So when they have traditionally subbed out workouts, they're not going to the northwest part of the city or the southeast, they're staying, in their zones. And then they'll go through the cycle, so every 5 years, they come back to the same spot. First, they gotta jet and clean the line, and then they'll televise it and get a report, so we know what our condition is. Unless we're coming in with a street project within our CIP, that stuff's done at a minimum 1 year before we're there. So we know what conditions of piping that we're dealing with.
Okay. The 5-year cycle for a downtown zone is just happened soon, is way out there 5 years?
I would have to verify with Public Works.
Okay. I was
But
just
like,
curious.
say through the downtown, Lake Street and Broadway, obviously that's all been done since 2012.
Okay.
A lot of new piping, not just the routine maintenance.
Thank you.
Yep.
Great question. Other questions of staff, questions in general? Staff is asking for 2 items. One is approval of the grant resolution, and the second is the approval of the grant application, and then the second is the resolution of support. That can all be done in the same motion. Not hearing any further questions or items of discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve.
I would second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Just a quick note of thanks to Washington County for continuing to have these partnership funds available. We are much appreciative, and I think this next step is, we've done step 1, and this next step on studying the results is the next best step, and certainly as we're thinking about additional projects downtown, also as we think about any potential multifamily residential areas downtown or other projects that would have high impact to sewer, I think this is great information that helps to eliminate future barriers for investment. So look forward to supporting it. Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Motion carries. This is the end of our action items on tonight's agenda. We do have some discussion topics. First item being the downtown committee. Dan, you want to start us on that?
Yep. President, members of the EDA, okay, here with the latest iteration of the downtown committee. And since we have a new member, I will just go ahead and go through just a quick background on this. So for Commissioner Erickson's background, so he's aware of what's kind of gone down the date for, but everybody else too will be kind of aware, just a refresher course as to what we've done. With the downtown committee to date. If you recall back with last summer when the city went through a strategic planning process, downtown redevelopment ranked high on that list of priorities for the city. Downtown revitalization has been on the work plan since the first round of work plan, which I think was 2018 as our first work plan. So This item has been talked about at the EDA since 2018. So again, it's ranked high in both EDA and City Council's kind of long-range planning. It's been discussed, so we did have quite a bit of discussion kind of on some scoping activities that were done here at the EDA back in the fall of 19. That scoping work was also brought to council for a council update to see if they had any additional feedback, any type of direction they wanted to see added to the downtown committee. So it's been scoped pretty extensively by both the EDA and the city council. Just to kind of, again, bring everybody up to speed on what the downtown boundary is. So back in April, we set up what is the downtown boundary for Forest Lake. Keep in the back of your mind, these are not a hard and fast boundary. This is not like a hard border. This is more of just an area where if a consultant comes in and says, hey, what's your downtown area? I can show them this map. Like, so when the Humphrey Institute came in and their students were saying, what's your downtown area? I gave them a copy of this map. So they had an idea of where to start their work, their scoping work. And what you see here is just the area that's outlined. It's inside this kind of dotted line here that my mouse is going around. Again, bear in mind that a lot of work that happens regarding the downtown area or kind of the redevelopment area will naturally kind of go beyond this area just in terms of a lot of the policies, some of the procedures that happen will touch kind of Forest Lake in general. But this is kind of geographical, the downtown boundary that was decided. And this was actually based off the MU1 zoning district, so there was a zoning district match to this. So we have some reason for selecting this particular boundary. Quite a bit of work was discussed as part of the scoping on the structure of the committee. What's the committee going to look like? What's the membership going to be? Who's going to be on that committee? How many members are going to be there? What's the meeting frequency? All type of, there's a lot of time kind of devoted to that. Both at the EDA, and we also solicited back council feedback to see what they kind of felt on the membership for the committee. I took all of that back and started to take a look at, put pen to paper and say, what will this actually look like if you get a committee started? Where does the best fit? What's the best membership look like? What kind of came out of that, exercise was basically a full EDA participation on the downtown committee. Two reasons for that is both feedbacks I took back on the committee format or formation had quite a few EDA members already naturally on the downtown committee. Secondly, it does try to help to streamline operations, because what would happen is if you have a downtown committee, the work out of there would have to get reported back to the EDA, so you're always spending part of the EDA agenda reporting back on what the downtown committee did, and then that work from the EDA would then get reported back to the council. So there'd be a lot of time spent in summary of what was happening on the downtown committee. By putting it in front of the full EDA for full EDA participation, it eliminates that need to report back to the body at large, because the body at large is going to be at the meetings. So full EDA participation would be recommended for the committee structure. We also talked about kind of expanding that out. We want to make sure that this plan does not happen, or the work that the committee does not happen in a vacuum. We don't want to develop a policy and just kind of bring it to the business owners and says, here's the redevelopment policy that we have. We want to make sure that they have an opportunity for input. So it was discussed of, let's expand the downtown committees, those who are attending those meetings, and invite in local business owners, developers, real estate agents, basically develop a deeper bench of people that can come in and offer their expert opinion, their expert input to certain subject matters. Kind of in the same vein, as Chris here comes in and offers us, his wealth of knowledge on a lot of economic development topics. The same thing would happen during the downtown committee portions of the EDA meetings, that we'd have those select other members would be able to come in and fully participate in the meetings when they're here, offer input, ask questions of the studies or what's being worked on. So we're having the full EDA and then expanding it out to some of those additional members. In terms of meeting frequency, we'd be looking at a monthly meeting. So one meeting a month for the downtown committee. The schedule for this, again, kind of realizing everybody's schedule has a lot of meetings already on it. We'd be allocating the second EDA meeting of the month specifically for downtown committee activities. So it's already a set meeting. It's on everybody's calendar already, so there's no additional meeting time that I have to try to schedule. We'd be devoting that second monthly meeting towards the downtown committee activities, and specifically on the off chance if there's a downturn in, where we have the first, EDA meeting transfers over, we could always allocate a little bit of agenda time for kind of that cleanup work, but for the most part, that second EDA meeting of the month would be devoted to downtown redevelopment or redevelopment activities in the city. Looking at kind of an initial work plan for the committee, again, we had a lot of kind of ideas that generated out of this. And in looking at it, I kind of put them into two different buckets. The first bucket, study review, kind of reviewing the existing literature that we have on our downtown area. And the second is the development of a downtown master plan. So going into the study review, we have a lot of studies that are on the shelf right now, are currently in development. And what's being presented here is not just sort of like, let's review the executive summary of the document and then put it back on the shelf. This is more of a, let's actually go through this, dig deeper in the executive summary, get a really good understanding of what's in that study. These studies will then help to guide the planning of the downtown master plan, because we're going to kind of take some existing information that we already have. Instead of having it exist on a shelf or in a digital archive, it'll be brought forward, dusted off, reviewed, looked at. So the three studies that we have here are the downtown infrastructure study, which we'll get the results from that in May, so we can start looking at modeling. The Humphrey Institute market study, which I'll discuss a little bit later in the meeting, but I just got a draft copy of that. So, that'll be something that we want to dive into. And then the Highway 61 corridor study, that big, I sent the link out this past April. It's about 90 pages. That document does go beyond just the downtown corridor and looks at Highway 61 generally, I think from Highway 8 down to 97, so it kind of incorporates all of 61. But there is a lot of information in that, and I want to make sure that we go through that in a little bit more detail than, again, just kind of hitting that executive summary or having the link available. So after the studies are completed, we'd be looking at doing a downtown master plan. This would be an activity that we would want to bring on a specific planner, hire a consultant planner who comes in and does downtown studies. Part of this would be to help the city identify future opportunities in that downtown area. A key component of this would be, we want to make sure, again, that there's a reliance on public input on this. We want to make sure this plan does not happen in that vacuum, that we go out to the public, that they're able to offer input, that as the plan is developed, it is done so with the public having the ability to give input on it. There's a few other cities that have kind of undergone something similar to this. Hastings has done this recently, St. Louis Park and Lakeville. And in fact, they're going to be giving a presentation at an upcoming EDA meeting where they're actually going to go through, we did some planning activity, here's the results of it. So I am planning on reaching out to them to kind of get their feedback, what worked, what didn't work, kind of talk to them about, on their master planning document. But when I started looking at all of the stuff that was talked about for different agenda topics, it seemed to say step one, and I met with, Pat and Chris and kind of we started hashing this out. Master plan was definitely the thing that kind of rose to the top. It says start here, and then based on here, once that's done, start looking at the next, topics that are in there. Looking at timeline for that, we're looking at the ideal situation, a second quarter start for the planning document. I'd have to get with the planners to see what their schedule looks like to confirm that's a realistic expectation. But once the planner's onboarded, they would then start to kind of run the downtown committees. It would basically, that committee would then kind of morph into working with the planner on developing of the downtown master plan. From now until when the planner's onboarded, a lot of that second meeting time will be spent on those existing studies. So it's not like we're going to not do anything until the planner's on board. We'll start doing some of that study work first, then the plan will happen. And that's sort of the land of where we are, where the committee is kind of morphed into. I think it's probably the most efficient use of meeting time. It's the most efficient use of EDA's time. And I think it's a good way to get a good master plan done for downtown. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions on, or comments you have on what's been presented.
What was the third community? You mentioned Hastings, St. Louis Park, and what was the third?
Lakeville.
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 Do you have any idea of how long their process took?
I have not. I'm going to read. I just found out from that. I just found out they just had kind of gone through something similar, and I had not had a chance to reach out to them to kind of confirm process timeline. I can bring that into the next meeting, though. That's kind of where I had looked at, bringing a little bit more of a detailed executables to the next EDA meeting.
Has there any conversation about the scale of the others who would participate? Numerically, how many are anticipated, or any sense of that at all?
I mean, so those other membership, I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's, the way, looking at it and kind of doing some initial scope and talking to, the President Bain about it was just, looking at that bench, kind of be developing a bench of talent where if we're looking at a specific real estate portion of it, bring in a real estate expert. If we're looking at, a financial spine, find a financial person that can come in to do some assistance there, or, a business incentive policy, get some local business owners in. So it's kind of one of those things where they'd obviously be invited to every meeting, if they want to attend those meetings, because it's an open meeting, they'd be able to participate. However, just kind of making sure that we're utilizing local talent as much as we can, because, in my experience in dealing with some of these policies before, if you develop them in a vacuum, they kind of, when they go out in the real world, then kind of, they're probably not well received. If they've at least had peer review or the ability for input, you tend to get more, then it's not just happening, and it's not just, city coming in and forcing something upon them. Has gone through. And the other key component about that is that when you go out and you speak with local business owners, you start to learn what are their contemporary issues. What are the issues that they're facing here in Forest Lake? Because sometimes those local issues may be different in Forest Lake than, say, what you're reading in the latest business magazine that's affecting a different community. So that boots on the ground knowledge, I think, is also critical for developing a good plan.
So, just to piggyback on that, I think that with this structure, if the EDA is comfortable that the EDA is the governing body of the downtown committee, I think it allows us to cast a large net so that we're able to capture essentially whoever would like to be involved. And some may choose to be involved at every single meeting, and that's fantastic. And then others may choose to check in and out based on whatever the topic is and whatever their particular area of expertise. But I like the idea of us being able to essentially extend an open invitation, allowing anybody who would like to opt in and be part of the group, and also for us to be proactively reaching out and kind of recruiting the talents that are needed. I think it lets us have a larger group, and again, some are going to be there every single meeting, and some are going to self-select based off of whatever their interest is.
So it would be open participation. We'll somehow advertise that idea
Yes.
pretty well and stay consistent with that. And then after that, it's a pick and choose specific business people or otherwise that could actually help us, define an outcome for something. So it'll be a flexible floating thing without actual assigned monthly participant members.
And I think we're able to accomplish that because, again, the group that has the decision-making authority is essentially the EDA. And since that's the fixed group, we can allow for, a much larger group of participants. And we haven't actively advertised this. I wanted to run it by this, the EDA tonight to make sure everyone was comfortable with that approach. But certainly an opportunity to actively promote that and advertise for involvement, as well as proactive, invitation.
I had looked at this as like an action group. The action group will be a whole bunch of participants that will provide input and ideas and thoughts.
Yep.
Then still funnel back through staff. A roadblock that I keep sort of seeing myself is we funnel back through, now let's take this action, that would be staff action, back to the EDA afterwards. We just keep funneling more through the small portal.
I think the one part that's changed is the addition of the downtown master planner, right? And so if there is another, that is another action avenue.
Maybe choreograph.
And frankly, one of the requests might come back on if certain areas, if staff, it does not have capacity to move on certain topics. I mean, certainly, we do have open budget still available for us to fund some of those initiatives to, so that we're getting the right pace. I think we should be open to that. How, what does that to-do list look like, and how are we accomplishing or moving as fast as we want?
Yeah. Well, I think we'll find enough people that might take on a task, because I see tasks out there before it gets back to synthesis by a staff member or otherwise.
Right.
So it'd be nice to know at least we'll bring up those ideas to whoever will participate in those tasks that sit out there.
Right. And I'll also say, if I've received nominations, I think, from Member Finneman and also, I believe, from Nanette at the Chamber have both sent me nomination lists, and also I'm welcome to. So I will reach out to those individuals and extend the invitation if we're comfortable with this approach. And then also I'm open to other, invitations or recommendations that other members may want to bring forward as well.
I've got a clarification question. When you're talking about business owners, are you talking about property owners and property renters?
I think both. I think both is important.
They
Yeah.
are. That's why I
Yes.
want to make sure
Yeah, absolutely.
we're talking about the same thing. Okay.
And today's list has at least one from each of those groups represented, but I think as many voices as we're able to get involved, the better.
Good.
But I do want to make sure that this group is comfortable that the EDA is essentially the working group with a larger advisory group, because we've talked about a number of different structures. But also looking at the fact that we've talked about moving EDA meetings to be once a month, having that second session. I would say if that second session is going to happen as the EDA, I'd like us to be up in the community room so that there's at least the impression that everybody's voice is welcome, everyone's voice is equal. There's not this audience EDA dynamic. I think a working group should have that dynamic, and that we're meeting up in the community room and we've all kind of got the same seat at the table. Other thoughts or feedback?
It's a question regarding the master planner. Timeline of a Q2 is pretty fast. Is there like a short list of master planners, or what does that look like? How does that come about?
I have a list of ones I'm reaching out to at this point to take a look at, past work. I'm also going to be looking at those other communities that use planning. There's a lot in the planning world, but they've been select that can actually do, downtown specific planning. And again, it's good that Q2 is just kind of starting it out. I mean, it's going to be dependent upon what their workload is. I may go out there to market and realize that everybody's in the same boat that we are, and it's down the road, a little bit down the road. If that happens, there's still enough work kind of on the bench that will definitely still be able to fill agendas from now and through, whenever that planner can start. But I anticipate there should be somebody out there in the marketplace that will be able to do a phenomenal job for us and will be available in that Q2 timeframe.
It would be nice for this group to at least have an idea of what that looks like by our February meeting, just to get an update and maybe even some ranges to look at. So we could kind of select and make sure we've got our spot reserved. Questions or thoughts on this downtown committee? Structure sounds okay as proposed? Very good.
So I'll just kind of take this structure, this thing, and or this kind of work plan here. I'll just start to formalize that moving forward for 2020 for the EDA.
And then, Dan, because the first quarter is going to be focused on those 3 different studies, I know you've sent them in the past. Can you do another update just to make sure we all, I just have a sense it's going to take us some time in discussion, and it's going to be some reading in advance to make sure we're all ready for those conversations.
Yep.
Again, with the goal being of let's not start with a completely clean slate, recognizing that a lot of work's already been done. So let's take advantage of that to decide what's next.
Yeah, I can definitely get those links sent out. I'll get them all assembled and get those all redistributed out to EDA.
Thank you. You mentioned Humphrey Institute study. Anything further you want us to go into tonight? You mentioned that you had it. Any?
Yeah, I just have a couple other.
Comments?
I have just the Q1 executables. If you just want to go over those quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I have the Humphrey Institute down there as a discussion point, so I can definitely get there in just a second. So if you go to your agenda, it should be right in the. I don't know what page it's on. I don't have that.
Page 6.
Page 6. There's the Q1 executable. So what this actually is I started roughing out agendas for the first quarter for the EDA, just to give everybody an idea of what's coming down the pipeline. So it'll be kind of front of mind for everybody involved. So like you see here, the meeting tonight, what are the things that we need to approve? What are the discussion topics? And what are we going to have for updates at this point? Again, keep in mind these are going to be subject to change. If we have another topic that comes forward, another item that comes forward, this is going to be sort of fluid. So we'll be looking at, for January 27th, the Humphrey Institute study review and discussion. So hopefully have that discussion on the 27th of kind of what's been happening with the Humphrey Institute study. And then also diving in a little bit into that master planning introduction, kind of take that down to the next level and start to do, a little bit more on the master planning there. On February 10th, the EDA meeting, I do have open to business confirmed for a presentation. I talked to Tyler. He'll come in and do a presentation on what the services that Open to Business offers, some of the work that he's done, and some of the, just kind of the stats. So everybody in EDA will then will be aware of what Open to Business is, because again, that's a great resource for local businesses if they're looking for expansion, help with a business plan. Tyler is a phenomenal resource for that. So he'll come in and do a presentation. Again, tentatively for the February 24th, start looking at the Highway 61 design standards. And again, I don't know what the timeline, that could probably be a 2-meeting topic potentially, just given the scope of that, of the scale of that actual standard document that's there. For March, I'd like to have CBRE develop a report of what's been done activity-wise on the Headwaters 123. I penciled in the discussion on the Conventioners Visitors Bureau. Again, that came out of the work plan as an item that, the EDA was looking to move forward with. I will say that one, I need to work with the Chamber of Commerce to make sure that they submit an operations plan, because that is a key component of developing a CDB, is having who's going to do the operations of it, the day-to-day management. So I want to make sure that they submit or we get an operations plan. So that one could shift a little bit, just depending on when that operations plan comes in. And then hopefully I can get Career Launch to come in and do a presentation as well. Don't have that one confirmed yet, but I do have a meeting with them later this month, and hopefully we'll try to get something confirmed with their schedule. Did ask last year, and they are willing to come in and do a presentation. It's just a matter of getting the schedules to line up. And then for March 23rd, hopefully we'll have a CDA grant application for the downtown master planning. I'm speaking with Chris. The planning activity that we'd be doing for downtown would be CDA grant eligible. So we'll have a grant application ready to go for there. And then again, another kind of topic that the downtown committee can focus on is, as part of the recently approved work plan, we kind of looked at that downtown redevelopment business incentive and started looking at that, and like, are we going to remodeling that, or we're kind of revamping that program, modernizing a little bit. So start the conversation there. That will be for sure a multi-meeting agenda item, but at least wanted to get that placeholdered in. So these executables are there for the most part, just to kind of give EDA awareness of what's coming down for first quarter, so we kind of know what's coming up on future agendas. And I'll try to update future agendas as we get through the first quarter here. But that's sort of the idea of what we'll see in first quarter. And again, if you look back to last year, there was a little bit of conversation, and we want to know what's coming down the road. So I'll try to do this for every quarter throughout the year, so we get a good idea of what's actually going to be the executables for that quarter.
Questions or feedback on the first quarter? Jenny?
Yep. On the February 10th Open to Business, is he going to be doing a full-blown presentation to us? And is this something that should be on the chamber website, open to any business in the area?
We can definitely get that advertised out, expanded out to the Chamber of Commerce. He is going to come in and do, at this point, basically an introduction to what his services are and some of the numbers and data that he's done before. So, but I think that's a good point. I think it's definitely something that could be out to the business community at large, and have them come in and attend if they want to.
Great.
I know he's excited. I had to talk to him about an opportunity to help partner with him at the EDA level. So if we hear of a business looking for a plan, we have that direct contact back with Tyler, because the work that he's able to do is, he's able to go in, help develop business plans, look at those funding, if there's a gap funding, he can help look at creative solutions for that. So he's a great resource to have. So he will be doing a full presentation to the EDA, and we'll make sure it gets out on the chamber site as well.
Any other questions or feedback on the first quarter? Very good. I also like the idea of kind of each quarter having that 3-year look or 3-month look ahead, what's coming up next. It's nice. Good to see progress.
And hopefully too, at the end of the quarter, we'll do the look back. I don't mean to keep looking at the look ahead and look back, but I think that's kind of critical if you're on a plan, is to kind of gauge where you're going and look where you've been. So what I'll probably end up doing in some of the overview memos in the quarter is just do a quick, take the existing work plan and just draft out what's been done in that quarter, and then give that out for everybody's awareness. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a good list of boxes that we got, of items that we got accomplished in 2020.
Very good. And now the Humphrey Institute study.
So I just received the update from the downtown, the Humphrey Institute study they did downtown. So this was actually just released to me on Saturday. The group went back. They finished it back in December. The professor offered them some feedback and kind of said, here's what the items you need to change. So they were working to incorporate those changes into the plan. They just released it to me, so I did skim it today. I don't really feel confident kind of going into the numbers at this point because I haven't had a chance to really kind of go through it. I will be meeting with the team that developed this, the student group that developed this on Wednesday to kind of go through. They want to present it. I will also offer to them if they want to come to an upcoming meeting to present it to the EDA to get them some experience in doing the presentation. I will see if it works out with their schedule. But also knowing that they're graduate level students who the class is over with and they're probably on to their next class. They may not, but I will offer to them if they want to come in and do a presentation that they're more than welcome to. But I do feel confident after that meeting that I'll be able to do the presentation because that's what the original intent of this was, is that I'd have a debrief meeting with the team, get that information back, and I could take the presentation forward. However, some students want to get some experience presenting to a board, so I told them if they want to present, they're more than willing to present. So at the next meeting, I'll have a much deeper, a better update on the Humphrey Institute study, but I just wanted everybody to know that it is complete. We do have the version right now, and I'm looking forward to meeting with them on Wednesday to kind of go through the nuts and bolts of what's in there. I will say, just one sneak peek, the one thing that came out that we need downtown is a grocery store.
A grocery store.
Like a small grocery store downtown. And they looked at it as an 18-hour cycle for like an 18-hour business cycle is what they kind of were looking at for their modeling, which I'm assuming includes, 7 a.m. to whatever, 12 p.m. at night. So that's what they kind of were basing it on. So it's, again, that's just me skimming it. So that's the two kind of sneak peeks that I have on the
I don't disagree with the grocery store.
Interesting, because I've heard that often.
And
What,
they
it
got
goes
some
with
data.
livability, right, and that walkability, and, yeah. What, how did we get on radar for this study, and how do we stay on their radar for next classes and other students who want to do great consulting work?
Well, Chris put us on the radar screen, so I, want to thank Chris for getting us on the radar screen. And, for future, I don't know what their future, if this is a quarterly class or if it's a once a year class. I don't know what they look like.
Once a year.
Once a year. So, I can always reach back out to the professor and say, if you
Yes.
ever need another, because I think sometimes it's tough to find cities that are willing to kind of, assist with this. So I'll just let the professor know if they ever want another study done. If you're looking for a group, we're more than happy to, offer us as kind of the model for.
Think about other areas, so you've got the industrial area, and then you've also got the, interstate retail, and that might, future retail, that might also be an interesting study.
And this one too, this downtown study they did look at the interstate a little bit. I don't know how much detail they went in, but there are maps that kind of show that because they wanted to see what are the two main trade areas here. So they do have that interstate portion on there a little bit, but I haven't, like I said, I haven't fine-tooth combed the report yet. So but what I saw on there, it's well done.
Very good. Any questions, follow-up? I think we look forward to hearing more when you're ready. Good. Thank you, Dan, for all of the updates. Next item on our agenda, Washington County update.
Thank you,
Mr.
President
Rainey.
Bain and members. Just a quick update for you. As Dan has gone through the 2021 Economic Development Plan for the city, the Washington County CDA is also doing the same thing for the county. And with help from Patrick and Dan in the work group that we meet with on a regular basis to get input from the cities across the county, we came up with a number of different activities, including the Open to Business program that we'll continue to fund for another 3 years. The Pre-Development Finance Fund is scheduled to continue. And the one thing that I want to highlight just briefly that we're looking at in 2021 to create a brand new program, it would be a revolving loan fund for the county. Historically speaking, the county is outside of the Open to Business program, hasn't done revolving loan funds ever for business development. So we're looking at creating a flexible program that would be available anywhere in the county for 3 primary purposes. One would be for business expansions, one would be for demolition of blighted properties, and the other one would be commercial rehab. And you do already operate a commercial rehab program in Forest Lake and the downtown area. We were just looking at how does a county help you with that activity, and are there ways that we could bring funds to the table that would help get that project just a little bit further along. So as we go forward into the next year, I'll be presenting this as part of our economic development plan to the EDA board for consideration on Tuesday next week, and hopefully to the county board in the next month or two. And then our plan would be to bring this to fruition and actually budget items for 2021 beginning for that revolving loan fund to actually have some money to be able to help the cities with those activities. I'd be happy to stand for any questions you may have.
If I could just piggyback off of what Chris said about the revolving loan fund. If you look on the work plan that we approved tonight, we do have a placeholder in there for consideration of that. So to assist if Washington County, if they're looking for cities that were in support of a revolving loan fund, we do have that in our work plan that if they're approved, we're looking at trying to piggyback off there to help support that county level revolving loan fund as well.
Is the goal of that to be a primary lender, or is the goal of that to take a second position behind a primary lender?
Thank you, President Bain. That's a great question. So no, we would not want to be replacing the bank money ever. But sometimes the banks on certain deals will only go so far, and there's still that gap left. We would come in alongside of Open to Business. We would not replace Open to Business money either. But if the bank and Open to Business can't quite get it to the starting line and you really want a project to happen, this might be one way that we can come in and help close that gap.
So the goal is a lender is at the table, just might not take the full position.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Other questions for Chris? Do you track Forest Lake activity, Forest Lake usage of the Open to Business program?
I do track it, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I will bring them at a future meeting.
That'd be great.
Overall, I can tell you that countywide, we've assisted over 250 clients with the Open to Business program. We've made about 14 loans totaling $700,000 and leveraged about $6 million in private investments. So the program is really successful. If I had to guess off the top of my head, I would say probably 20 to 25 businesses in Forest Lake so far have been assisted.
Excellent.
Or entrepreneurs have been assisted that live here in Forest Lake.
Excellent.
And I'll get those exact numbers for you.
Yeah, it'd be great to see those numbers. It'd also be great to know timeline. Is that recent investment? And so are we going up in utilization, or have things slowed down? And
Yeah, and I'll get those numbers for you, just don't have them in front of me tonight.
Perfect, good,
Thank you.
thank you. Anything else for Mr. Eng? Hearing none. Chamber of Commerce update, and that's not here, but Jenny, do you have anything from the chamber?
No, our next big event will be Business Expo in March, and that's what they're working on.
What date is that in March?
March 20th? They changed it on me, so I think it's March 20th, end of March.
And where is that?
It's going to be at Maranatha Church. Last year was very successful and bigger participation than the year before. And a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of new businesses, and people are already signing up, so.
Excellent, very good. All right, anything else to come before us this evening? Hearing none, great discussion this evening, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Oppose, and we're adjourned.